We can't head into winter without a proper celebration of the start of winter hiking. Get ready for the return of Full Conditions Winter Kickoff, presented by Bergen Outdoor and Reckless Brewing Company, happening Saturday, November 22nd at the Colonial Theater in Bethlehem. Each November, we celebrate the start of winter hiking with a full day of activities, all to raise money for local search and rescue teams through the New Hampshire Outdoor Council. On November 22nd, the day begins with a community hike to the summit of Mount Pemigewassa in Franconia Notch, where the Reckless crew will be waiting with hot chocolate, coffee, and snacks for fellow hikers. Later that evening, the Colonial Theater will host a ticketed event featuring an exclusive screening of 109 Degrees Below, a live episode of the Slasher podcast, a lineup of inspiring guest speakers, and cans of Full Conditions IPA, our special collaboration brew. So who are we going to have for speakers with Slasher at this event, Stomp?
We have a heck of a lineup. So when the pod takes the stage, we're going to be joined by Reckless Steve, of course. He's going to give us a great update on the latest craft brews and what's happening at Reckless. We're also going to be interviewing Paul Cormier, who is the current president of Mountain Rescue Services. And then to top off the evening, we're going to be talking to Joe Lentini and Ty Gagney on stage combined. So, Ty Gagney wrote the recent book, Lions of Winter. And Joe Lentini himself was a part of the Albert Dow event so many years ago. So it's going to be a really great night of education, talking about Full Conditions and what you can do to prepare, and so much other information. It's going to be a fantastic time.
Excellent. So if you want to go to this event, make sure you get tickets while they last. You can find them at eventbrite.com. You can search Reckless Full Conditions. There's also going to be a link with every episode that we're posting. And you can also find links in the Reckless bio, as well as Bergen Outdoors and Slasher. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah.
And it should be a great time.
Yeah, and remember, the Full Conditions event is a benefit for the New Hampshire Outdoor Council, which is an umbrella nonprofit in the state of New Hampshire that provides funding, grant monies to the volunteer search and rescue teams. So the night is a very important night for the teams.
Excellent.
See you there.
Broadcasting from the Woodpecker Studio in the great state of New Hampshire. Welcome to the Sounds Like a Search and Rescue podcasts. So You Wanna, a vignette series where we share post-hike reflections, challenges, lessons learned, and essential insights to prepare you for your next adventure in the White Mountains and beyond. So let's get started, shall we?
All right, Nick, welcome to another episode of So You Wanna. This time we're going to So You Wanna hike North and South Kinsman.
All right, let's do it. I'm excited.
All right, very good. So for the listeners, if you want to check out like some, I was looking through the archives, Nick.
Way back.
The Sounds Like a Search and Rescue archives, and I was trying to find there's a fair bit of rescues that have happened on Fish and Jimmy and Kinsmans, but there was an episode 88. Stomp had explained to me about Fish and Jimmy, because I think I had asked him that we did a little segment at the beginning of the show about, I had said that a lot of people don't like Fish and Jimmy, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
But he had gotten into that a little bit, and then on episode 131, I had covered it as a recent hike with my daughter and her boyfriend Devin and Jake and Nobby and Steve had hiked with it. So
cool.
we had done an episode there. So if listeners want to check it out, so episode 88 in the beginning, there's a little segment there with me and Stomp riffing. And then episode 31, halfway through, there's a recent hike summary. So, but yeah, that's what I got for history, at least on the main episodes, Nick. So why don't you give a little overview? Well, actually, before you do your overview, I'm just going to skip to the last part of the script. I'm going to bring it at the beginning. So you began your 4,000 footers on the Kinsmans on north, I think, and then finished on south. Like, how does that happen? That's so unusual.
So yeah, not the most popular, and we'll talk about this, or a good suggestion for a first 4,000 footer, but my buddy Mike Cordero, shout out to Mike, another Mike who hikes, but he was into kind of hiking in New Hampshire and Franconia Notch, and eventually got me into the 48 and stuff. But he actually told me and Ash, he's like, hey, like when we were going up there for fall foliage, I don't know, 2013 or so, he's like, oh, like there's a really cool hike to Lonesome Lake, and maybe you guys could do a 4,000 footer. And like, I had no idea what that was at that point, or the difficulty or anything. So we didn't do it that fall, but the next summer we went back, and he was like, oh yeah, try doing North Kinsman. It's like one of my favorites. And this is like, also at the time, only a guy that had hiked like Franconia Ridge and like not much else. So I think number one, the difficulty level was, he was a little bit more used to it, maybe not judging, but it's a pretty beast, I think, of a first 4,000 footer. But anyways, it was a hot August day, I think 2014, and we hit North Kinsman, and the skies got real dark and cloudy and stormy. And we were pretty low on water. And I kind of knew there were going to be thunderstorms later in the day, so we decided to turn back and we bailed on south. So that's how we ended up with just north. And it dumped rain like when we got back to Lonesome Lake into the end of the hike. And then, yeah, we finished on south, which we figured we planned that just because it has views, and we'd get to go over North Kinsman and kind of relive that like first hike again, and continue to south and finish them out. So yeah, special peaks in my heart.
All right. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. So you were just, young Nick was just starting to learn. That was around the time, I think I started really hiking in like 2011 or so. So we both kind of started around the same time on our little journey. Yeah.
When we put this out, I'll have to share some pictures I dug back in the archives. It was actually through Facebook of Ash and I, and I'm wearing like a t-shirt and like cotton shorts. And like Ash at least has some moisture wicking clothing on, but it's just funny. It's like, we all start somewhere, but it was funny to like look back and see what we had. We had like little Camelback backpacks, and it was interesting.
Yeah. You dial in your gear over time for sure. You start going out more, and you start seeing people on trail, and you're like, oh, well, this is what they carry. So now I'm going to tailor my gear to what everybody else is using. Yeah. But, you got up and down the mountain with those little Camelback.
Yeah, we made it.
Backpacks. So, all right. So we're here to talk about North Kinsman and South Kinsman. So just as an overview, these are 4,000 footers, typically done together, but not like Nick just covered. You don't need to do them together. So Nick, why don't you give the overview of these two 4,000 foot summits?
Sure. So North and South Kinsman, they're both peaks on Kinsman Mountain. Northern peak and a southern peak. North Kinsman is at 4,293 feet. It resides in the towns of Lincoln and Easton. North Kinsman is known for its distinctive profile, especially from the south. You can see it has a gradual slope to the west, as most of the ridge does, and it has a very steep east-facing ledge which drops precipitously off into Kinsman Pond, which has a campsite right below it. North Kinsman, as far as views, has fantastic views on the east side of its summit from a ledge. The actual summit is entirely wooded. And this ledge basically takes in all of Franconia Range and beyond. Then we'll move on to South Kinsman. So South Kinsman stands at 4,358 feet, also in the towns of Lincoln and Easton. And then a little kind of interesting thing with South Kinsman, as far as the high point, there's actually two different sort of knobs on it, a northern one and a southern one. USGS actually shows the northernmost knob as being the high point, as opposed to the southern one. And NH LiDAR, our granite LiDAR map, actually shows the two knobs have the same elevation, so being no different. So the north might be higher, or they're the same. The southern summit knob is typically the one that everybody goes to, and probably its most coolest feature is it actually has sort of a throne built out of stones on it, in addition to a big cairn. And that's usually the destination when people try to hit the summit of South Kinsman. And South Kinsman has basically open views, 360, not maybe from one spot, but if you're kind of poking around between the crumbles and stuff, you kind of can get views of pretty much Franconia Ridge. You go Vermont to the west, you can see Moose Log to the south, and all the southern and western New Hampshire peaks. I think that's about it. I did negate to mention there is one other viewpoint on North Kinsman, about 1.1 miles south of the summit. And you can actually see South Kinsman from this little viewpoint before you just start to descend to the column between the two. And you can see some of the Vermont peaks like Killington and stuff behind it. So good stuff.
Right. Yeah. And the, like we said, typically these are done as a out and back or in some combination of each other. So they're about 1.5 miles, I think, from, well, not 1.5 miles. I think it's like a little bit shorter than that. But like once you get above tree line on the most common northeast approach, then that's 1.5 mile walk on the ridge to cover both summits. So you're basically talking about 3 miles total to get out there. And I don't know the exact distance from north to south. Maybe you covered that, but it is a little bit longer than you think it is. And when you do this hike, you basically you go up, then you're going to go down and then up again and then down and up. So it's a little bit of a PUDS type of hike.
Yeah, absolutely. Back to the PUDS podcast a little bit. Right. But yeah, I want to say it's like, I don't know, 500 feet of up and down between, like it's a good drop and then rise between south and north. And most times you're going to be climbing back up north, and essentially climbing the summit cone of north twice if you're doing an out and back on these. So it can be challenging.
Yeah. My recollection on doing these is that final climb back up to north is tough.
Yeah.
This is not, I would say this is a moderate to difficult hike in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think most routes you're looking to do both. You're looking at a ballpark pretty close to 4,000 feet. And I think, like you said, it's. I don't remember anything being necessarily technical between the two summits, and especially if you're doing from the Kinsman Mountain Trail. But it's just it's a grind. Like it seems to flatten out, and then it just kind of goes straight up again. It's not like a gradual descent and rise. It kind of just drops rapidly and then goes right back up.
Yeah. Willie Tom Field is a little bit like this too.
Yeah.
I think that the hike from Field to Willie seems like it should just be this little jaunt right over to the next summit, but it's way longer than you think, and then you got to go back, and it's like, oh, this is really hard. Yeah,
absolutely. It's funny when you were saying that. I would say it's very comparable to going out to Willie and then having to climb back up to Field. It's that similar vibe. It's a climb that seems like it's more elevation than it actually is.
True. Yep. All right. So you've given us the overview of North Kinsman and South Kinsman. Do you want to give a little bit of history on this?
Sure. So probably can go into at least the nomenclature first. So the name Kinsman Mountain itself first appeared on a map by Philip Carrigan, who was New Hampshire Secretary of State, the namesake of Mount Carrigan, in 1816. So both of these peaks make up the high points of the ridge crest running south to north from Kinsman Notch to Franconia Notch. And then further north on the ridge basically continues over the notoriously kind of difficult to hike over Cannonballs, down to Coppermine Col, and then up to Cannon Mountain. So that whole section, Cannon Mountain, is technically part of the whole Moosilauke sort of Kinsman region itself. It's the northern terminus of it. So Kinsman Mountain is named after an early Easton settler named Nathan Kinsman, as is Kinsman Pond, that lived from 1741 to 1822, so quite a ways back, pre-Revolutionary War he was born. His family arrived in Easton Valley in 1782 after relocating from Ipswich, Mass. So he was the original masshole, apparently.
Right.
To go on
and he got a mountain named after him. That's impressive.
He did. That's not too shabby, Mike. They haven't done a Mount McLaughlin yet. Maybe it's going to come one day.
No, so maybe someday we'll see. I won't hold my breath.
It's a high aspiration.
Right.
And apparently their trip to the Whites was legendary as far as in White Mountain lore. And they took an ox-drawn cart up into the Easton Valley with all their belongings and stuff. And I'm not exactly sure, it didn't mention in the guide why exactly they left. And they made their home near present-day Slide Brook, which at the time was actually part of Lincoln. So it actually wasn't, I guess Easton didn't exist yet, or the property lines were different. So Kinsman pretty quickly became a widely respected citizen of the town of Easton and Lincoln, I guess, at the time. He was a man of many talents, including a doctor, and he also served as Grafton County coroner. So kind of cool. And then some other different just names in the areas, like in features. So Kendall and Judd Brooks off of Kinsman Mountain were named for other Easton families that lived in the region, kind of early settlers. The rugged Fish and Jimmy Trail, which we referenced just a couple minutes ago, was named after a local character whose real name was James Witcher, and he was featured in a story by regional author Annie Trumbull Slauson. Harrington Pond was named for AMC trail builder Carl P. Harrington, who discovered the pond while laying out off Kinsman Ridge Trail in 1917, and Eliza Brook was applied in the early 1900s by a trial worker, John Stetson, after the middle name of Harrington's wife. And then as far as first ascents, it's likely that Dartmouth College graduates A.A. Abbott and A.M. Batchelor, members of Professor Charles H. Hitchcock's 1871 Geological Survey team, which ended up exploring many of the unreached areas of the Whites at that time, were the first to discover the Kinsmans, and it's assumed that because they discovered Kinsman Pond, which is only 553 feet below it, and it seems likely that at the time the two Dartmouth College students would have ended up ascending up to the Kinsman Ridge and finding their way to the summits. Mm-hmm. So not a for sure thing there, but it's kind of widely thought that they were the first ones actually to get up there. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and I will say that, like in the early Appalachia journals from starting in 1876, I think they talk a lot about these early explorations, and Hitchcock comes up quite a bit. There's a few other folks, and Abbott, Batchelor, they basically had this setup where they had like an exploration committee that they started, but before then they had known people that would go out and explore different parts of the White. So it makes sense that this crew would be up there checking it out.
Yeah, and speaking of around 1870, I actually didn't mention this when we were talking about the views, but around 1870 there was actually a ridgetop forest fire that scorched the entire top of South Kinsman. So that's why South Kinsman is mostly bare and North Kinsman is not. I'm not sure exactly if it was contained or it went out. Probably at the time, I imagine it was probably like a lightning strike and rain put it out or something like that, or it just fizzled out by itself. But kind of worked out for us as hikers because we have views from South Kinsman.
Right. And we'll probably release this during foliage season next. So I think just overall, my impression for foliage is that, you would, on south, you would certainly have like a spectacular view of Franconia Ridge. I think also you get some good views down in Lonesome Lake, which we'll talk about the northeast approach. And then this particular area here, I haven't been on Bald Peak, but you do call it out in the script here. And I know that you've been on there before, and it is recently added to the 52 with a view list. And it is off the northwest of North Kinsman via the Mount Kinsman Trail. So what are your impressions of Bald Peak?
Bald Peak is amazing. So I did it in the winter when I did the Kinsmans for my winter list, and or I should say when I first did it. And it blew me away. It's like an open ledge top. You kind of can see all of Kinsman Ridge sort of behind you, more or less, from where you ascend up to it to the east. You can see sort of the cannonballs and the top of Cannon to the north, and then out to the west you have all of Easton Valley. And you kind of can look into Vermont. I imagine it would probably be an amazing sunset spot, kind of facing mostly west. And literally, like, you could look and see like Mount Mansfield and Camel's Hump and all that. Like, you're not super far away, I guess, at that point. Really close to the Vermont border, but it's a really nice spot to check out in itself, even pre being on the New Hampshire 52 with the view list.
Excellent. Then you have some notes here about the trail history. So do you want to start going over that a little bit? I can add some color, I think.
Sure, absolutely. I would love for you. I figured you'd probably know some of these names and jump in. So as far as trail construction to the Kinsmans, 1910, the first official trail in North Kinsman is established by Frederick Tuckerman and A.B. Hubbard. So it started at the time from Cecil Bowles Farm in Easton, and it was about 3.5 miles in length. In 1911, Tuckerman and Hubbard extended the trail to South Kinsman. Then around 1917 to 1919, AMC crews cut out the Kinsman Ridge Trail, which linked Kinsman Notch to Franconia Notch. So kind of a big deal. And it led over both Kinsman summits from there.
Yeah, and this was part of that initiative by these, they called them the Trail Crew, but it was Charles Blood and Nathaniel Goodrich, and they had Paul Jenks was the other one, and then Carl Harrington was in that crew as well. So it was a mix of like different, like there was some high school teachers, there was some college professors. Yep. They all got together basically, and this was part of the initiative of trying to connect the different sections of the White Mountains together into a single entity, so that they were able to connect basically Moosilauke up into Franconia Ridge by connecting the Kinsman Ridge Trail.
Yeah,
and it's still a pretty, I mean, it must have been a difficult feat to cut that, but it is still a pretty, like, it's not a heavily traveled area between Moosilauke and Kinsman. Typically, and we'll talk about this when we talk about the directions, but typically people are coming in from the northeast, from Franconia Notch to come in.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, I don't think I called out anywhere on this, but basically from Kinsman Notch, when you leave down Beaver Brook Trail from Moosilauke into Kinsman Notch, and then you head up Real Brook up to the Kinsmans, that's the AT. I don't think I actually called that out anywhere here. And then it kind of continues over the Kinsman Ridge Trail down to Fish and Jimmy. And then I think Basin Cascade after that. I might be wrong on that. I know it doesn't go down Lonesome Lake, but yeah, it's kind of ironic that other than A2 hikers, it probably doesn't get a lot of traffic from peatbaggers, generally speaking.
Right.
So
excellent.
So continuing on here, I know you kind of mentioned Carl Harrington and stuff over here. So 1920, Carl Harrington oversaw work from White House Bridge and Franconia Notch to Kinsman Pond. So this path later becomes Kinsman Pond Trail in its upper part and Cascade Brook in its lower part. And it's also, I thought this was kind of interesting too, is that this trail at the time, just the way they're building it, was actually extended up to the Mount Liberty Shelter. Now, I did look a little bit on this. I'm not sure if it was an old Mount Liberty Shelter or if it's where Liberty Springs currently is one caveat there. I'm not positive on that one. I would assume it was at Liberty Springs if they had any shelter on the west side of Liberty, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either on that.
So 1921, the first shelter is constructed at Kinsman Pond, beautiful location. 1966, the AMC builds a new shelter at Kinsman Pond, and then it actually was rebuilt in 2007, so fairly recently. Then
yeah, and that shelter is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's not an open lean-to. It's a three-sided cabin, but it has a little bit of shelter from the front. I think it's like a more of an enclosed front.
I believe so, Mike. I've seen pictures of it, but I haven't actually, no, I should say I just don't remember what it looks like from last time I was over there.
Yeah. It's been a couple of years, but I think it is. So it's set up. It's set up pretty good to like sort of. You're not going to get much wind there anyway because it is pretty sheltered anyway. But it is a. It is a good shelter from that perspective. It's not your typical wide open AT shelter.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're kind of nestled below the ledges of North Kinsman over there. It's a nice spot. So 1924, the AMC builds a shelter near Eliza Brook. Then in 1928, the AMC takes note, and it's weird the way that this was described, but I don't know if like someone cut this trail and the AMC just was like, oh, it's there and we're using it. But the AMC noted that there's a trail from Easton Valley to Bog Pond. Part of this trail becomes the Real Brook Trail. 1930, Fish and Jimmy Trail from Lonesome Lake to Kinsman Pond is cut by the AMC. So you have the AMC to thank for that aggressive assault on North Kinsman Ridge. And finally, at this point, you didn't actually, this actually makes sense, and I didn't think of it until I read this, but at this point, finally, you didn't need to climb over the cannonballs from Lonesome Lake Trail and Coppermine Col to get over to Kinsman. So go directly to Kinsman Pond or go around extra mileage and climb up and down over, 3 cannonballs? So that it's definitely easier to do Fish and Jimmy Trail than do that. So thank you, AMC, for cutting that path, because otherwise we'd all be going over that or some other route to get to the Kinsmans. So late 1950s, the Basin Cascade Trail is built by state park workers, and that pretty much covers the existing trail system on the Kinsmans. And these were a couple other little facts that I just pulled just because I thought they were interesting. I knew this already, but I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with it. But in the 1970s, when they were actually constructing the whole interstate system through New Hampshire, they actually were originally considering Kinsman Notch to be the site for the interstate instead of Franconia Notch. So I-93 could have passed through Kinsman Notch instead of Franconia Notch. And it makes you think how the towns and the development could have kind of changed if that had actually happened at the time.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I haven't driven down that 116 road in a long time, but I'm assuming that's what they meant by it, is that where 116 is, they would have just done the highway there. I feel like there's just more room to maneuver in there, so, but there must have been a good reason why they decided not to. Yeah,
I don't know if like that wasn't as fleshed out and Route 3 was better. I don't know. You'd have to look, you could pull some more history on that. Be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then this was another thing that I just thought was cool, but there was actually a Mount Kinsman cabin that was built along the Mount Kinsman Trail to accommodate skiers in the mid 1930s. And it was torn down by the United States Forest Service in 1982 as part of sort of a restoration project of the wilderness. But there was actually a Kinsman ski trail that ran 3 miles from the Mount Kinsman Trail to the coal between South and Middle Cannonballs at the time. So I had to look on a map to kind of see where this is, because it's not somewhere like you're going to really have a good vantage point looking at. Maybe the top of Cannon. I kind of had to go back and look at some photos I had from the winter up there, but you can see there's sort of this little valley, I guess, like a valley that sort of runs between the two, where you could see that they do kind of connect, which is kind of cool. I'm imagining the ski trail is long grown in at this point, so you can't really tell where it was, but maybe if you knew what you're looking for, you could find the old tract of it.
Right. Yeah, I do remember being up there where there was some backcountry skiers that were up around there. So I don't know if they were skiing somewhere off the back or not, but I've definitely seen skiers up there during the winter. I haven't climbed this one. I haven't done this hike that often, like twice, and both times it's been like winter conditions. So, but I don't know much about the skiing options back here.
Yeah. Cool. So, Mike, do you want to go over some of the trail approaches we have to tackle the Kinsmans?
Yeah. So, just starting from the western approach, and full disclosure, I haven't done this direction. It's on my list to get done. But on the western approach, basically, you're going on New Hampshire 116 in Eastern Valley, and the Mount Kinsman Trail and the Kinsman Ridge Trail. So essentially, this is the, and again, I'm more familiar with the northeast approach, but essentially, once you get past the Kinsman Pond Shelter, you connect with the Kinsman Ridge Trail. So the Mount Kinsman Trail essentially goes up that western side from 116 and connects with the Kinsman Ridge Trail. So it's very similar, I guess, as far as the hike goes from the northeast side, but you're basically just going up from 116. And if you just do North Kinsman only as an out and back, it's 8.2 miles with 3,250 feet of elevation gain. And then if you add on the north and south out and back, then it's 10 miles total with about 3,900 feet of elevation gain. So it is a long day. No matter which way you cut it, you're going to be doing close to 4,000 feet of elevation if you do both summits.
Yeah, so right there, if I'm doing my math correctly, like 650 feet ascending back up to North Kinsman. So that's a pretty good climb to round out. And I was going to say, so I did this route in the winter. And the western side, like we talked a little bit about how the profile of these mountains, and I believe it has to do with the glaciers and how they raked them. But the western slopes rise up a lot more gradually than sort of the steep eastern sides that drop off into Franconia Notch. So the western ascent, compared to the Fish and Jimmy Trail, in my opinion, I did this with like ice on it and stuff. There wasn't enough snowpack for snowshoes, so I had spikes on. But I found it a lot more reasonable than going up Fish and Jimmy Trail. It's long, and almost approximately, I think, the same amount of elevation gain, but it's just not as aggressive. Then again, you don't have Lonesome Lake. I think it has its own beauty in its own way. It does have Kinsman Flume on it, which you can explore, and Bald Peak, which is really nice. So something to keep in mind if you're going from that side.
Yeah, and then from the northeast approach, this would be the most common approach. So essentially, from a trailhead perspective, you can park in a couple of different areas here, but from a trailhead perspective, you can park on the north side of 93 if you want to just get off and park at Lafayette Place, and where you would normally hike the Franconia Ridge Loop. You can park on that north side, and there is a tunnel that goes under the highway, so you can scoot right under there. So it's really your choice on which side. If you prefer not to go on the north side and go under the tunnel, then you can just loop back around if you're coming from the south, and then on the south side, there is a parking spot there for Lafayette Campground, and there's like two different areas. One is you can pull into the main parking lot, and then there's another lot that's a little bit farther down that actually gets you right to the beginning of the Lonesome Lake Trailhead, and you can connect with Cascade Brook Trail. And the classic hike for this one is essentially just leaving, heading up to Lonesome Lake Trail, going to the lake. You can kind of take a little bit of a break, and then obviously you have Lonesome Lake AMC hut right there that you can stop in, and this hut is pretty good. It's open in the winter the whole time, so you can go in there, and later in the day they will have like the stove running. Matter of fact, it's I think the last time I went, they had the stove going when we came back, so it would have been maybe we were late in the day, but it probably was like 4:30 or so. They had the stove running, because I remember going in there and being like, "Oh, this is nice."
Oh, that is nice. Yeah, we get a little warm up in between before you head out to the parking lot.
Right, yeah. On the weekends, it's crowded, but it's nice to go in there and just chill out and see all the winter hikers and the people that are staying overnight and whatnot. And it's just a nice little break. So yeah, Lonesome Lake offers some great views. You can, especially if you hit it late in the afternoon, you'll see the sun will be setting, but it will be basically pointing towards the Franconia Ridge view, and you can get some really nice photos there, which is cool.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, like there is that around, I think Basin Cascade is on sort of the southern end of Lonesome Lake, or eastern side of Lonesome Lake, and then you kind of have around Lonesome Lake Trail on the west, but there's some stunning viewpoints at Franconia Ridge on that side, and I don't really think it adds much more mileage if you're going around it as opposed to going more directly to the AMC hut, or elevation, I should say.
Right. Yeah, and I'd say the hike up to Lonesome Lake is pretty gradual and easy.
Yeah, it's not
and
bad.
You get to the hut, and then from there you transition up to the Fish and Jimmy Trail, it's a pretty steep trail. I'd say that the way I would describe it is there's a lot of erosion on it, and it's kind of narrow in some spots, but it's just a steep, grinding trail that goes on for, I don't know what the exact elevation gain is, but it's probably at least 1,000 feet to get up there, and eventually you top out at the Kinsman Pond Shelter area, and then connect with the Kinsman Ridge Trail, and then from there you can do your out and back. You get to the North Summit, you've got some nice views, and then we've already talked about sort of the out and back to get to the South Summit. But I have on my Strava, I was just taking a look at this, Nick, because I think the book has it as like 8.2 miles and about 3,000 feet of gain if you just do north out and back, and then it's got 10 miles at 3,600 feet. I have this hike, and I'm trying to think if I did any side quest. I did not do any side quest on this. And on my Strava, I've got it as 11.7 miles, and I've got the elevation gain as 4,100 feet. So
yeah. It was question. It's like Tom Field Willie. Whenever I do that, I always end up with way more than the book has. So either my GPS has been wrong with 3 different GPS watches, or it's actually more than that. But I don't know.
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit more. My legs confirming that it was closer to 4,000 feet, I think.
Yeah. And on the Fish and Jimmy Trail, like we talked about how me and Ash, this was our first kind of jaunt up a 4,000 footer, but I remember getting to the sections. There's a couple sections on the Fish and Jimmy Trail where there's wooden blocks drilled into ledge to help you. Similar to, like, I've seen those on the Wildcat Ridge Trail going up to Wildcat too. It kind of has a similar thing going on, but I remember kind of being like, oh, this is like a lot different than we kind of talk about, like hiking in the Whites. And I think that's always like a thing that we always like pride ourselves on, kind of weirdly. But that was like my first introduction to like what it was like White Mountains hiking, like doing some scrambling and like wooden blocks drilled into ledges and stuff like that. It was fun and memorable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then just covering the eastern approach, which is essentially, like we said, northeast, which is like up by Lafayette Campground and Franconia Ridge Trailhead. If you go down a little bit farther south, you've got Basin Cascade Trailhead, or you can park at like White House Trailhead.
Yeah, any of those.
And technically, this is like the official
it's the
Appalachian
the AT
Trail.
route.
Yeah, okay. So you'll see a lot of people that will do this, and then they connect up with Liberty Springs. But either one, you can kind of take your pick. And the White House Trailhead is a little bit of a you got to do a connecting trail to get onto it, and then Basin Cascade is more of a direct. So if you do Basin Cascade, essentially you're doing the Basin Cascade, you'll come up past Kinsman Falls, and then you connect with Cascade Brook Trail. If you do the farther southern approach, you'll just stay on Cascade Brook Trail, and then eventually just continue up Cascade Brook, and that will hit Lonesome Lake, and then you can just essentially do the same hike that we talked about through Lonesome Lake and then up Fishing Jimmy. If you prefer to get off of Cascade Brook, and you can cut a little farther south to Kinsman Pond Trail. Kinsman Pond Trail comes up on the southern approach from Kinsman Pond, whereas Fishing Jimmy comes up on the north of it. And then you essentially just come past Kinsman Pond and then past the shelter and then connect with Kinsman Ridge, and then you can do your out and back here. So this is a little bit longer distance-wise. So this has 11.4 miles and 3,600 feet of elevation up and down. I suspect it's probably going to be a little bit more on your watch, but I have not done this approach. I haven't been out to Kinsman Falls. I've been meaning to do it, but I just haven't got there yet. So, but it's very similar to the Fish and Jimmy route. So it's kind of choose your own adventure, Nick.
Yeah, I haven't done sort of the next approach we're going to talk about, and I haven't done that one either before. Basin. I know there's always it's signed for like a bridge washed out on there, which I feel like at this point it's like they should just take it down, because I don't think they're going to rebuild that thing at this point.
Yeah,
but who knows?
Yeah. And then from the southwest, then Railbrook Road off of 116. You'll take Railbrook Trail to Kinsman Ridge Trail, and this is basically a southern approach where it's 12.8 miles just to get to South Kinsman, and 3,650 feet of gain, and then it is 14.6 miles as an out and back. And essentially this is, correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, but this is essentially like picking up the Appalachian Trail.
Correct.
and essentially just going from Beaverbrook, where Moosilauke finishes up, and just heading up to Kinsman Ridge. Essentially, you go past Mount Carr, Mount Wolf, and you do the whole basically southern AT section of this area up to the Kinsmans.
Yeah, and I believe there's like a 1 mile section up to that ridge that's pretty notorious among AT hikers. That's kind of difficult to do. And I'm also, as I was typing this up, I was thinking and reading it, I guess, like who does that, the South and North Kinsman out and back from that direction?
I don't think anybody.
Like 14.6 and 4,300 compared to the other routes. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Find a friend and do a traverse for sure. And then there is, if you're doing a backpacking trip too, it's a pretty good distance. And then you also have Eliza Brook Shelter, which is a little bit south of, probably a couple miles south of South Kinsman. And then, you've got Kinsman Pond Shelter. So you get a lot of AT through hikers up in that area. There's been a couple of rescues recently too over there. So like you said, it's no joke in that area, but it is pretty isolated. So you got to be careful out there.
Yeah, and we actually, this is and I was going to say our buddies pretty recently did that traverse, but if you're hitting that traverse and car spotting from where Railbrook begins and then down the Mount Kinsman Trail, sort of to the west and easton, that's 11.4 and 3,600. So that's actually kind of butter. That's nice if you think of it. And I know like Jake and Paul and all of them kind of did that not too long ago, and Peter, I believe.
Right. Yeah. And from a camping perspective, you got the shelters, you've got the Lonesome Lake hut. I have camped out at Lonesome Lake, not at the hut, but like there was enough snow where we could legally camp out there in like the overflow section. The one thing I'll say about Lonesome Lake is if you're going to camp out in that area, just be very careful, because whatever the air temperature is, take about 10 to 15 degrees off of it, because Lonesome Lake is one of these areas where the air just like drops down.
It just settles into that little like.
It's just the cold air just settles into that bowl there. So one weekend we were doing an overnight, and we were like, okay, it's going to be 0 degrees. That'll be cold. We just didn't factor in that like Lonesome Lake in particular, just the cold air just gets compressed down into that bowl, and it must have been probably like minus 10, minus 15 degrees.
That's noticeable.
It was like one of the coldest nights I've ever had. So it was. not a fun night. So don't recommend doing Lonesome Lake as a winter campsite, but there are plenty of shelter options up in that area.
Yeah, and speaking of winter stories, if you're going to do these in winter, just a couple of things to keep in mind. So the Mount Kinsman Trail off New Hampshire 116 is not reliably plowed, according to the guide. I did this in the winter in January, and it was plowed. So it depends, I guess. And it actually was after some snow the previous day, so someone must get out there. I know this trailhead too, if you follow Slasher and you listen to our other episodes, this is also the hotly sort of debated, like not debated, but there's been issues with this parking area on 116 for the Kinsman Trail with fees and whatnot, and there was a bit of hubbub earlier in the year about it, but that's the same trailhead. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Might not be plowed out. I don't know. I found it plowed out when I hit it a couple winters ago, but that's one trip. So the northeastern eastern side, basically Franconia Notch is usually plowed out. Usually the Lonesome Lake Trailhead's plowed out, which can get you sort of up that Fish and Jimmy side. I know usually, basically the basin and that whole area and White House Trail for Lake Liberty and stuff gets plowed out pretty quickly after snowstorms usually. And then really the only one you absolutely can't rely on, and it's not shocking, is that Real Brook Road is not plowed out in the winter. And it's also sort of noted, as we noted, that most people don't tackle the Kinsmans from this direction, especially in the winter. Usually it's just AT summer hikers that are kind of headed up that trail, or maybe people doing traverses. Or if you're going to do a Kinsman Ridge traverse or something, I guess you might do it that way, but just not very popular. And the Mount Kinsman Trail, if you had snow on it, would be like a really good snowshoe route. It doesn't ever really get crazy steep. I think the steepest part's probably going between north and south, and that's it.
All right. Well, my winter homework assignment is to get back up here and take a different route, maybe come in from 116 or try that approach from the basin.
Yeah, I'd be curious with the basin approach. I know it mentioned that it might be a little bit hard to follow in spots, especially in winter, but I got to think it's pretty beaten out if it's the AT. It must be well blazed and all that. But,
yeah, I would think so. But so we did a pretty good job, I think, covering all there is to cover on the Kinsman. Nick, anything else you want to highlight before we say goodnight?
I did want to touch on just briefly. We talked Lonesome Lake in itself is a great family hike, or like if you're kind of just getting into hiking and you don't want to like chomp off a 4,000 footer or maybe a bigger peak. Like Lonesome Lake in itself is a beautiful destination. It's kind of the first real hike that Ash and I ever did. So just it's a great spot and a really beautiful area. But yeah, that's it.
Very good. All right. Well, hopefully you are inspired to go check out these two summits. You get a two for one hike on this one with the 4,000 footers. Yeah, which is always nice.
Yes, agreed.
But you won't be feeling very positive when you have to climb back up to North Kinsman. But
maybe.
That's part of the price, people.
And descending down the Fish and Jimmy Trail. But there you go. And just think of that. Next time you're going up the Fish and Jimmy Trail, going down it, you could be going over the Cannonballs to get to the same place.
Correct. So, all right. Until next time, we will bid you adieu.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to learn more about the topics covered on today's show, please check out the show notes and safety information on slasherpodcast.com. That's SLASR podcast.com. You can also follow the show on Facebook and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next week for another great show. Until next time, on behalf of Mike and Stomp, get out there and crush some peaks.
knock on wood.